In 2005, the American aerospace company SpaceX first publicly announced a rocket concept with the capabilities of Starship. The rocket was going to have a larger version of the Merlin engine called Merlin 2, would be able to lift about 100 tons (220,000 pounds) to low Earth orbit. However, the rocket was not mentioned to be reusable. The company had additional plans for another rocket called the Mars Colonial transporter. Although little information has been made public, it was known that the rocket would be powered by the Raptor engine, fueled by liquid methane. The rocket would have been able to carry 100 tons (220,000 pounds) of cargo to Mars. Just before the 67th International Astronautical Congress in September 2016, the first sea-level optimized Raptor engine was fired. At the presentation, SpaceX CEO and Chief Engineer Elon Musk announced the Interplanetary Transport System. The rocket was to be fully reusable and made of carbon composite, able to put 300 tons (660,000 pounds) to low Earth orbit. It would use the same Raptor engines to combust liquid methane and oxygen, launching the spacecraft on top in orbit. There in orbit, they could fuel each other, giving some enough propellant to go to further destinations. Even though the interplanetary transport system had many features to reduce its launch cost, funding for it was not explained satisfactorily. The only mentioned use of the rocket was ferrying crew to Mars for exploration and colonization. In September 2017, Musk announced a revision to the rocket design and renamed it the Big Falcon Rocket. It was planned to be 106 meters tall and 9 meters wide, able to launch a reduced 150 tons to low Earth orbit. The booster engine count was reduced to 31, and the spacecraft to 6. Finance for the rocket development was clarified, as the Big Falcon rocket could clean up space debris, land on the Moon, and travel between locations on Earth. Its ultimate purpose, however, was still to ferry crew to Mars. After the talk, Musk clarified on Reddit that the delta wing heat shield on the spacecraft was not to induce lift, but for orientation control. In September 2018, the dearMoon project funded by Japanese billionaire Yusaku Maezawa was announced. Maezawa, along with 6 to 8 other artists, would fly a free return trajectory around the Moon, and create artworks in the process. There, Musk presented a revised design for the rocket that was 106 meters tall and the same 9 meters wide. Its spacecraft would have 2 forward flaps at the top and 3 aft flaps at the bottom, along with 7 Raptor engines. The flaps are used to control the spacecraft's descent, and the bottom ones can also be used as landing legs. 2 months later, in November 2018, the booster was first termed Super Heavy and the spacecraft was renamed Starship. The first prototype to operate a Raptor engine was the Starhopper. It had 3 large non-retractable legs, and was noticeably shorter than a normal Starship spacecraft. The craft performed 2 tethered hops in early April 2019 and hopped untethered up to 20 to 30 meters 2 months later, doing a controlled hover at a low speed. In August 2019, the vehicle hopped to 150 meters and traveled to the landing pad 100 meters away. As of August 2021, the vehicle has been retired and was repurposed for radio communication, weather, ground station, and a water tank at Starbase. SpaceX then constructed Starship Mark 1 and Starship Mark 2, located at Starbase and the SpaceX facility in Cocoa, Florida respectively. In late September 2019, Musk presented more details about the booster, the spacecraft's method to control its descent, its heat shield, orbital refilling feature, and potential destinations outside Mars. The spacecraft design was once again changed, reducing the number of aft flaps from 3 to 2. Musk mentioned the switch of Starship material from carbon composites to stainless steel formally, claiming its lower cost, high melting point, cryogenic temperature strength, and ease of manufacturing. After the presentation, Mark 1 was destroyed during a pressure stress test 2 months later, and Mark 2 did not fly because the Florida facility was deconstructed throughout 2020. After the MK prefix, SpaceX named subsequent prototypes with the prefix SN. No prototypes between SN1 and SN4 flew, as SN1 and SN3 collapsed during a proof pressure test and SN4 exploded after its 5th engine firing. During the interval, the company accelerated the construction of infrastructure at Starbase, which uses large tents, stations, and repurposed intermodal containers. When linked together, these facilities act as a production line, hastening the rocket construction. SN5 performed a 150 meters high flight on the 5th of August 2020, successfully landing on a nearby pad. On the 3rd of September 2020, Starship SN6 with a similar structure to Starship SN5 repeated the hop. SN8 was the first complete Starship prototype and underwent 4 static fire tests between October and November 2020. The third test ingested fragments of pad material into engine internals, causing an earlier shutdown. The fourth test was successful, and on the 9th of December 2020 SN8 flew, reaching an altitude of 12.5 kilometers, 7.8 miles before performing the belly flop maneuver. Just before touchdown, an issue related to propellant flow caused the prototype to lose thrust and impact the pad. 2 months later, on the 2nd of February 2021, Starship SN9 launched on an almost identical flight path and crashed on landing. On the 3rd of March 2021, after abort 3 hours earlier, Starship SN10 traveled the same flight path. The vehicle then crushed its legs and landed successfully. Minutes later, SN10 exploded, possibly due to a propellant tank rupture. After approval from the FAA, on the 30th of March 2021, Starship SN11 flew into thick fog along the same flight path. The vehicle exploded during descent, scattering debris up to 8 kilometers, 5 miles away. In early April 2021, the first tank was placed into the fuel farm for the first orbital launch pad. During the same time, NASA selected Starship HLS as the crewed lunar lander. SN12, SN13, and SN14 were not fully assembled. Instead, various improvements to the vehicle structure, software, and engines were featured on SN15. The vehicle flew on the 5th of May 2021, did the same maneuvers as prior prototypes, and landed, completing the first successful mission. In July 2021, Super Heavy BN3 first fired 3 of its engines. Super Heavy BN4 was the first that can mate to starships, while Starship SN20 was the first to feature a body-tall heat shield, mostly made of black hexagonal heat tiles. A month later, Starship SN20 is stacked atop of Super Heavy BN4, the first pair of vehicles to be so stacked. In October 2021, the catching mechanical arm was installed onto the first launch tower, forming the recovery system. 2 weeks later, just north of Launch Complex 39B, NASA announced the new Launch Complex 49 that will launch Starship at the Kennedy Space Center. In February 2022, Musk gave a presentation on Starship development at Starbase. There, he clarified many of the information provided in the past, as well as giving updates at Starship HLS, Raptor engines, and the environmental assessment of Starbase. The rocket is planned to launch from Starbase, then Super Heavy will separate and perform a soft water landing around 30 kilometers, 20 miles, from the Texan shoreline. The spacecraft will continue flying with its ground track passing through the Straits of Florida, and then softly land in the Pacific Ocean around 100 kilometers northwest of Kauai in the Hawaiian Islands. The whole spaceflight will last 90 minutes. Starship is designed to be a fully reusable orbital rocket, with the aim of reducing launch costs drastically. One launch may deliver more than 100 tons to low Earth orbit, which would formally classify the rocket as a super heavy lift launch vehicle. When stacked and fueled, Starship may be about 5,000 tons, 11 million pounds, by mass, 9 meters wide, and 120 meters high, taller than the Saturn V rocket by 9 meters. And finally, we are at the end of this video. Do like this video if you found it good, and share this video to your friends to let them know about this giant rocket.